taxes just to get to their wafer-thin surplus.
Mr. Speaker?
I call Julianne Genter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to take a call on the bill that raises petrol taxes, the Customs and Excise Budget Measures Motor Spirits Amendment Bill. So, this bill raises petrol taxes. Why does National need to put up the petrol tax? It's essentially for two reasons. The first reason, and I think this is a reason. Oh, I've got a copy. Thank you, Minister.
Order.
Thank you, Minister. I had a copy. I had so many graphs and other.
Order. I'd actually like to hear what the member's saying, so please give her that courtesy. A point of order, the Honourable Jerry Brown.
We just want to know that she knows what bill she's talking about.
I'm sure she does. Julianne Genter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was very busy actually reading the regulatory impact statement that we just got on this bill, so I didn't have the title right in front of me. But it's very clear what this bill does, and what it does is put up the petrol tax. So why does National need to put up the petrol tax? Firstly, it's because people are driving less, and they've been driving less since before 2006. And this is very clear in New Zealand Transport Agency data. They show that vehicles on state highways are down, vehicle volumes on state highways have been declining, and the population has been increasing. So that means per capita, vehicle kilometres travelled are way down, and this is a trend that we've seen all around OECD countries. It's not that surprising, but unfortunately it hasn't yet been reflected in the government's transport funding priorities. Now, the second reason they have to put up the petrol tax is because they have mismanaged the transport budget. And this is really clear in the regulatory impact statement, which says that the priorities that the government has set specifically for the roads of so-called national significance, which is really just three very big, very expensive motorway projects that all have benefit-to-cost ratios of around 1 or less than 1. I mean, really only 1 if you exaggerate the benefits. So they've got this huge commitment to building motorways at a time when traffic is declining and people are driving less. This is the government's budget for new capital investment in infrastructure over the next 3 years. And the purple bit is all on new state highways. And of course, it's only the 3 new state highways that are extremely expensive and have a low benefit-to-cost ratio. Now, there's a tiny little slice going into local roads. So who's going to pick up the tab for local roads? Well, it's not road users. It's ratepayers. Road users do not pay directly for capital investment in new roads. If they did, we wouldn't be able to fund them. You know, if users of Transmission Gully or the Waikato Expressway were asked to pay directly for the billions of dollars that are going to be put into those projects, it would never cover the cost of building those projects. And that's why the government's had to put up the petrol tax. So essentially, although we hear a lot from the government that roads are user pays, that's not the reality. The reality is that new capital expenditure is funded by users of roads everywhere in the country through marginal increases in petrol tax. And so that means that the use of the road doesn't necessarily reflect the cost of it because people don't pay for it directly. Secondly, more than 50% of all vehicle trips are traveling on local roads. And this is data that came through an official information request to the Minister of Transport. So the government should know that more than half of all vehicle trips are happening on local roads, and local roads are half funded by ratepayers, not directly by users or road users. So at the moment, what we have is a highly vehicle-dependent transport system. That transport system forces us to spend billions of dollars actually increasing our current account deficit because we're importing oil, which has become much more expensive. So over the last 10 years, oil prices have doubled in the past decade. And so for that reason, even though we're not importing any more oil, people are driving less, we're paying twice as much for it. You would think that the national government, if they were concerned about New Zealand Inc., would care about reducing our current account deficit and would see that there is an opportunity to reduce our current account deficit by reducing our reliance on very expensive imported oil. But obviously they do not. because what they're doing is prioritising all of the spending in the transport budget on projects that don't give New Zealanders choices. They don't give New Zealanders the choice to save money on oil by taking public transport, by walking or cycling, by letting their kids walk and cycle safely to school. That's a very cost-effective opportunity to not only reduce congestion, but to allow people to get around to the places they need to go without having to fork out for expensive imported oil and also to pay more in petrol taxes. Saying that you have to spend all of the petrol tax or road user charges on new roads is like saying the alcohol tax should be used to build new bars. It's ridiculous. What we need to do is rebalance our transport system. So what the Green Party would say is that not all taxes are bad. It's important to distinguish between two types of taxes. There are taxes that are just for raising revenue, and you can tax employment, you can tax income, but those are good things. Why would we want to tax good things? We don't want to tax good things just for the purposes of raising revenue. The Green Party's tax policy likes to see a shift, and this is best practice economics, which I know no one in the National Party has ever been exposed to. But if you read The Economist, they, for example, were saying that higher petrol taxes are a great way to tax away vulnerability. Basically, we know petrol is going to be getting more expensive. We know that it's polluting. We know that we've passed 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that is a major problem for humanity. And, you would hope that they would care about the future of humanity. So we have there is an imperative that we reduce our consumption of fossil fuel, and transport is a real opportunity to do that in a win-win way. So people can spend less on the amount of money. They can spend less money on getting around. That's good for the economy. We have less carbon dioxide pollution in the atmosphere, which is good because it means that humanity can continue to survive for generations into the future and have a high quality of life. So it is an imperative that we reduce our dependence on fossil fuels for economic reasons and so that we can survive as a species. And transport offers us this great opportunity. So the Green Party can support a slow, moderated increase to the petrol tax as part of a way of enabling our transport system and our economy to become more resilient and less dependent on fossil fuels. Unfortunately, the projects that the national government are prioritising are simply the worst way you could possibly invest in the future of transport right now in 2013. I can't think of a worse way. We've got all the data which shows us that new roads have diminishing marginal returns. They aren't opening up new links to new areas. They're places where we already have road links. The best use of our money is going to be at using our existing road network smarter, using it better, and part of that is investing in the complementary alternatives to the road, which is our rail network, which has been severely underinvested in for many, many years, and coastal shipping. And in our towns and cities, it's safe walking and cycling for children and adults who would like to be able to get around without having to jump in their car and spend a ton of money on petrol, and investing in public transport where it makes sense. And it does make a lot of economic sense once you take a broader perspective on the benefits. It is really essential that New Zealanders have choice, and this government is not giving them choice. What it is doing is putting up the petrol tax and then putting all of the money into projects many of them will not even use on a daily basis. The percentage of vehicle trips on Transmission Gully is less than many arterial roads in Auckland. So it will be Aucklanders sitting in traffic because the government has refused to fund the City Rail Link and other smart options who will be paying the fuel taxes that will be paying back the loan on Transmission Gully, which only is going to serve about 10,000 people a day. The rail network in Auckland currently carries 45,000 people a day on weekdays, and it could carry twice that many people with the City Rail Link. It could take the equivalent of 12 motorway lanes of traffic off the roads, and certainly that is a good use of road users' money, if ever there was one. So what this government is doing is extremely short-sighted and irresponsible. It's not going to give us a resilient transport system. It's not going to protect the economy from high oil prices. It leaves us in an oil-dependent situation, which is going to worsen our current account deficit, which is bad for the economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to acknowledge and thank the member from the Green Party, Julianne